Hello, Miss Bethany.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, you remember what we had a discussion about.
About disruption.
Do you want to just talk, or would you prefer I ask you questions, or both?
Both.
Do you want to start out?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I was adopted from Thailand. I was adopted by a family in another state. I think I was about 7 years old. It was very hard at first because I didn't know who I was with. Coming to America was new to me and I was scared and I didn't know what to think.
And you didn't speak English.
No, I didn't. When I got home with them, I felt sort of happy and sad because I didn't have a family when I lived in the orphanage. That was technically my family. I was glad that I had a family, an actual family,
So, how long were you with them?
for a year.
So, do you know why it took so long?
No.
Because the agency called your parents, but we did not have a current home study approval. So we had to go through the entire home study process, and you had to wait. It took an entire year. I'm sorry we made you wait so long. It's kind of the system, right?
Right.
We would have come down there and gotten you the first day we got the phone call if we could have.
Yeah. So when they told me that I was no longer going to be a part of their family, I felt really sad. And I didn't know who I was going to be with. I heard about this family that you were going to adopt me. And I was kind of excited. You guys were a big family and with a lot of kids, and they were blind, just like me. When I lived with the other family, I was the only blind person. When I was about to transition to this family, they were telling me that I didn't have to call them mom or dad anymore. It made me really sad. I think they wanted to do what was best for them.
For them
Or I think for
or
me.
for
For me.
you?
I mean, for me.
And to be perfectly honest, Bethany, there's probably both of those things are true, huh?
Yeah. I feel bad. Sometimes I feel bad, especially for some of the kids who have gone through it.
How do you feel? Like, you know how we're always really honest with you guys,
Yeah.
and we tell you the truth more and more as you get older, right?
Right.
We don't sugarcoat the stuff, do we?
No.
We just kind of tell it like it is. Do you like that, or would you rather like just not know and
I
not
like to know.
you like to know? You seem to be a pretty happy, well-adjusted young lady.
Yes.
Is it okay with you if I tell more of this story?
Sure.
Thank you, Bethany.
You're welcome.
We love you.
I love you too.
I'm glad to hear that. Are you comfortable sharing your story here on YouTube, David, about your adoption a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. We talked about this ahead of time. This is a very sensitive topic, and we certainly wouldn't do this unless we had discussed it fully ahead of time.
So I was abandoned on the steps of the government center in China when I was, what, 3?
3
3
months.
months. And then I was found and taken to an orphanage, and they were trying to find a family for me. So eventually, they did. It was a blind couple. Yeah, they took me in and things like that. But after a few weeks, they realized that they couldn't handle me.
Now, how old were you when you first got adopted?
I believe I was 5.
You were 5. Do you remember anything about your
I
first
don't
placement?
really remember much. Kind of vaguely remember like being in the car, but other than that, I don't really remember much.
I know that you've talked to her since then. Do you have any memory of, being with them or
No, not really.
no?
No.
Now, how long were you in that family?
I'd say a few weeks, like maybe 2 or 3. I'm guessing I was a handful. Really, I'm pretty sure I did a lot of things, but
They were very concerned for your safety because you kind of kept tearing away from them and running out into the street. They were scared to death that they weren't going to be able to keep you safe.
yeah, I was probably used to that from the orphanage because I think I had a lot of freedom there.
I think people are very interested to hear from adult adoptees.
Well, my thought is that really too bad when an adoption is disrupted, but at the same time, in the interest of the child, a disrupted adoption is like a pathway, I guess, or like a way to it's like a move through life to get to a better place essentially. It's like a little bit of suffering to have a long-term good. And when you're thinking about the interests of the child, if the parents don't think that they can parent, then it's more responsible, in my opinion, of them to try and find a new home where the child will be loved and have a better quality of life. I think that's the responsible thing to do as a parent. I was at an age where I just didn't, it wasn't as influential for me. But now I'm at an age where like I can just accept it and accept that things happen and people have their reasons for doing things. I can try and think of reasons why my birth family would, abandon me or whatever, but it's also like you got to move on. I guess it's not really worth thinking about it and fretting over it and things like that. That's just my worldview, I guess. Yeah, it's pretty much a non-issue for me.
Do you like our approach? We always kind of tell you guys everything just the way it is, and we really don't hold back on facts and truth.
Yeah, I think I like it better that way.
Do I have permission to tell your story?
Yeah,
Kind of give a little more background?
yeah. You'll never be able to really understand something unless you've gone through it. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't judge them without understanding. That's what I'd say.
No, that's fair enough. We're very proud of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We love you. So you guys heard the kids said that we could tell their story. It's really pretty remarkable, and they each went through a very difficult beginning of their life. David and Bethany. We'll talk about them. We've had others of our kids have had very, very rough beginnings. You can watch our adoption videos. You can watch our adoption awareness video if you want to learn more about our particular family. I want to focus on David and Bethany mostly because they are 20 years old. It's very difficult sometimes to get them to talk about their story because David is just kind of David. He's real chill and laid back, and he knows his history. He knows his story. When I say it's a non-issue to him, I mean, David doesn't really have any feelings or any thoughts about it really at all. Do you think?
No, and I don't think he has any ill feelings.
No, not at all.
He knows they're just milestones along the path of life, and for him, I know when we first had him in our family, he was actually pleased that he was born blind so that he could live here in America. He knew one of the things.
He would say things like that
when he was in third, fourth grade. He would say, "I'm glad that I was able to come here to be adopted and to have an American family because I didn't have that in my birth family."
The fact of the matter is, this is the truth. Had David not been born blind, he would not have been
placed for adoption.
And I'm going to use the word abandoned because when a baby is left in a basket on the steps of a government building without adult supervision, the adoption community does not like the word abandoned, but you heard David use it. It's a definition, and it actually is what happened to him. Okay. And so I want to just really quickly, without dwelling on it, I do want to address this. One of the comments that we've been hearing a lot about, you guys are saying, well, a birth mother would never do that. If a child was born to you, they would never do that. But guys, where do babies come from? Really, they come from birth mothers. They come
all of
from
them. Every single
we
one of them
all
does.
do. We all are
every single one does.
Biological beings, and we've all got biological, parents. And some parents, whether they are biological parents, birth parents, or whether they are adoptive parents, sometimes, even though they've gone through the process and they're loving people and they're kind and they're sometimes, it just, things happen. There's just, I can't even describe it because things just happen. And if someone is not ready, willing, able, equipped, or suited or whatever they decide or someone else decides about their parenting, then the best interest of a child is served by allowing them to be parented by someone who is willing and able and ready and equipped. Right. And
so the point is, I think what you're trying to say very clearly is that every child that's been placed in a home for adoption, okay, has already been placed for adoption by their birth parent.
Right.
So every child that's in it that's already adopted has already been disrupted.
Every adoptee has a birth family.
So when people say that, well, they would never do that to a birth child, or someone says that.
Most people wouldn't.
Most people wouldn't. But every person who's been adopted has been. So
it's just kind
of like it's 100%.
We don't mean
that's been happening.
We know what you're saying, and
we do.
And we love you guys' passion, but sometimes you gotta, kind of stop and think for a minute. But let's talk about David. Okay. So he was in this orphanage until he was 5 years old, and he kind of liked it there. I mean, he was with a caretaker.
Yep, he had a tribe.
Yeah, and he was kind of, he was a great kid, and he didn't know that he was blind, and he kept getting himself in trouble, like running through. One time he ran through a plate glass window, and he's got a big scar on his arm from that, and he, ran out into the street he was a little troublemaker, but he was 5 when the family went to China and got him, and there's a really interesting story about this. So we already had Hannah, Abby, and Jesse. Mm-hmm. Okay, they were already part of our family. Well, they were already in school, and they had a teacher who would come to the house sometimes. They just worked with the kids, and she had a friend who was getting ready to adopt, and she told us, she was at our house one day, and she said to me, this is a true story. She said to me, my friend is going to China to pick up her son. She's going to adopt her son. Well, her friend was David's first adoptive mother. And I have goosebumps telling this story, because I had no idea in that moment, on that day, on that porch, that she was talking about my son coming home.
Right.
No idea. We were filling out another application with an agency because we had seen this, we had heard about this other little boy, and so we were filling out the generic application with this other agency, and I am not kidding you. This was all in the same time frame. I had my pen to paper filling out that application. The social worker called me up and she said, you are not even going to believe this, but I just found out about a little boy who is in desperate need of a family because his family who adopted him has decided that they're not going to continue the adoption and they're not going to parent him. And so what happened, I'm trying to get my facts straight here, but basically she said that there was another family that, that they were thinking about. And she said, would you be willing to talk to this other family about some of your experiences, and that kind of thing. And so I did. And I talked to this woman and I encouraged her to, they weren't sure that they were going to be able to adopt, but I encouraged her to maybe go see if she could take him for a weekend and for respite, for a break for the family that was going through this, this decision that they had to make, and to kind of give the kid a break,
They had adopted a couple of
Chinese. They had adopted from China.
They adopted from China.
And they spoke
Chinese. So
and David did not speak English at this.
Yeah, so it was kind of the part of what you were trying to put together, I think, was the respite so that they could have a weekend with him and communicate in Chinese and kind of figure out some of the things that were going on. And you know,
I think the mom really wanted to adopt and the dad wasn't quite ready to make that commitment. And so this is another interesting thing. As she, I was talking to her on the phone during this time, and as she was returning him to this first family who happened to be friends with our teacher, as she was returning, she says, "Oh, I'm returning him back to the family." And we're talking about where she was, and I said, "Oh my goodness, that's my exit." Like, that happened. And she said, "Well, do you want to meet him?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I want to meet him." And so she took off, she went off the exit and came to the house, right? And here comes this little kid, this little 5-year-old boy, comes waddling up the stairs. He's just adorable, this tiny little kid. And they stayed and they stayed and they stayed, and he was having his cookies and the kids were playing, having a good time, and Hannah came home and they were all good. And then, as the day progressed,
right, you called me at work, said David's here. I said, "Oh, hope he has a nice time." And
hope he enjoys his visit.
Home,
yeah.
And then about an hour later, you called me and said, "You better come home." And so he came home that night.
Yeah, we called our attorney. We called the first family. This is highly unusual what happened here. And the reason that we were able to do that is because David's adoption was finalized. All Chinese adoptions are finalized in China. And that's so correct. They already were finalized. Most kids are placed for 6 months before finalization can occur. Okay, they're going through the process. The child's been placed for adoption. You still have to wait 6 months with the child in your home before you can finalize. But in China, they're finalized in China. And so because of that, he had only been with them for 7 weeks. And because of that, they were able to make the choice and do what is called parental placement. So we spoke to our attorney, and the attorney said, "Yes, you can go." She drew up the papers. We signed the papers. Then we proceeded to get custody, right?
Right.
And we went through the entire home study process again, which is very long. It's very intense. We maybe can talk about that in another video or something. But
I think during that process, it's important to know that everyone has representation at the court,
including the child.
So the parent who is placing the child for adoption has an attorney and representing them and their interest. The adopting the family is being placed
receiving
with,
family.
The receiving family has their attorney, and the child has an attorney that's appointed by the court.
It's a guardian ad
litem, and that attorney is representing that child's interest through this process. So when we said that we called the attorneys and we got this all taken care of, this is how it's done properly.
Right, exactly.
So every state has laws regarding how these transitions have to occur.
You would have a really hard time telling me that David isn't our son.
Yeah.
Or shouldn't be here, or it wasn't, because that is so obvious that it was meant to be. Right. We were not thinking about adopting David. We didn't know about David. But for the teacher to come and tell me that her friend is picking up her son in China and it ends up being my son, I mean, this is like so hard to understand. And, it just, I don't know, it was just meant to be. That's all. It was just meant to be. And it was a very difficult process for the first family. It wasn't an easy process for David. It was kind of an interesting process for us, and it's just how things in life happen a lot of times. And I don't mean to make light of this or anything, but it's just, thank God there are adoptive parents. Thank God there are, there
are social workers that have their ear to the ground, that are looking for kids that or families that need extra support, that need respite, or need a little bit of encouragement.
They
and
try
need
their best,
and that there's families that are on the receptive end of that, wanting, like you did, to help that other family with some support on the blindness aspect and parenting a blind child and giving them some support there. So there's these resources that are out there. Now, if you were looking at that whole situation from a completely external view, and you didn't understand adoption, you didn't understand
Oh, it would
special
be
needs, you didn't understand the
weird.
legal process, you didn't understand what
Yeah.
went into just determining what the child's needs were, what the best interests of that child
Right.
were going to be. It would be very difficult to be from the outside
Oh,
and
it
being
would
able to
be,
look at that and
yeah.
say, "Oh, I would do that," or "I would not do that," because you're
And
not
you just, you
engaged
have
in
to,
it.
I want to caution you guys. Like I said, I appreciate your passion. I understand your anger. I understand your confusion. Your opinions are, some of them, they line up with my opinions, but I don't feel equipped to judge another family. And the reason that I don't feel equipped to judge another family is because I've been in that same situation. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked briefly about the fact that we ourselves have disrupted twice. And, they're long stories. I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on David and Bethany here.
Well, the fact is, they
And-
have been the result of a very successful process in their in their
Yes.
life
And
through the journey that they've been on.
Right. And this this happens all the time, and we hear a lot of positive stories. There are negative stories.
And there are adoptees that have tough stories too. And
They do have tough,
and we need to listen to them as well.
absolutely. And I thought it was really important, for you to at least hear from David and Bethany a little bit. And for those of you who are new and you don't understand, Bethany does have intellectual disability. She's pretty good about articulating, her story and things. And there's, she's told other stories that are on our channel and been in videos. You might want to go check them out. Bethany's a sweet, sweet girl. And, but it's very hard for us as parents to, I don't want to prod them. I don't want to, I don't want to put them in an uncomfortable situation or whatever. But she did a pretty good job. Now, Bethany's story is also very interesting because Bethany, we first heard about her when she was 3 years old.
Yep.
In the orphanage in Thailand, and we did apply to adopt her.
Right.
We wanted to adopt Bethany, and we made our application to Thailand, and Thailand turned us down because Thailand's rules, every country has different rules and regulations, and their rules were such that we were too old and we had too many children already in the family.
Ironically.
And so, again, the meant to be.
4 years later, they had our file.
4 years later, she
and
was adopted.
And then she was.
They kept our file.
They kept
That's
our
pretty.
file,
Well, we had adopted several kids through that agency.
Same agency. So they
They
knew.
have
They
us
knew
on
of
speed
us.
dial.
Yeah, they had us on speed dial.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when the other family decided to, place her back for
We got the
adoption,
call.
we got the call.
And
so,
it did take
thank
that
God they
long. Yeah, thank God. And what they said is, "Are you still interested?" And it's like, well, we never stopped being interested.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's like when you decide to adopt a child. You do fall completely in love with the child, and even before you meet them, even before you bring them home, you really do develop a bond yourself. And I'll tell you what's really difficult is when the child is not able to reciprocate that bond.
Yeah.
You have
It
to
is
understand that they've had such a traumatic start to their lives.
Yeah.
Even if they haven't endured abuse, even if they haven't had, what we would consider neglect or, that kind of difficulty, they still have been moved. They still have been, taken from the birth family or given from the birth family, however they came from their birth family, and so there are all these things that might, cause attachment issues in a child. And
they have security issues and obsessions and
all kinds
different
of
kinds
stuff.
of things. There's security
Yeah.
things like obsession with food or different kinds of secure.
Now, see, we learned
things.
about a lot of these things because before we ever adopted, we went through foster care training. We never fostered in the way that, you all think of fostering. We never actually took in a foster child because in our particular county, what we were told early on is, well, we don't want you to foster because you are still growing your family.
Yes, that's
And
right.
remember that?
Yep.
And we don't want you to get attached, because when a child goes into foster care, the idea is that they're going to be reunited with their birth family. You know, if that's possible, and they'll go to the nth degree to make sure that that's possible.
Right.
You know,
You can't get attached.
you just
get attached in that
cannot.
way.
And so, you know, you have to parent the child. That's a very complicated thing.
God bless all you foster
thank
parents
you
out there.
to all you foster families.
Because we got the training, and they scare the bejeebus out
and
of
you know, the private
which is
agencies should
great.
really do the same thing.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't gone through a
So-
foster care training, oh my
And you're
word.
thinking about adopting, see if you can sign up for foster care training classes.
Yeah, and if you're
They'll tell
weak,
you
if
what
you're
it's
weak,
like.
if you're weak need, then I mean, there's folks in the class that'll tell you some stories.
Oh yes, you'll
and
hear the stories there.
You'll find out from firsthand experience of what some of these foster
But you'll
moms
know
and
what
foster
to
dads-
expect.
Exactly,
And
that's
you'll
the
be
thing.
able to identify these behaviors
And where
that
to
are
get
going
help.
to come, and where to
and
get
who to
help.
call,
And-
and that it's not unusual.
And like with David, for example, he was that first night. Oh my gosh. I knew enough. I held him as tight as I possibly could, and it was all I could do. I just held him and let him cry himself right to sleep. It took hours.
Yeah, and it took all your strength
It took all of
And
my
all your-
strength, and
to just hold him.
and he was in our bedroom for
Yeah.
weeks. He would wake up and having night terrors, and you know, in Chinese, and he'd wake up speaking in Chinese, and he was just so scared. These kids are scared to death when they come, and you know, and Bethany, it was a lot of the same stuff. Oh my gosh, Bethany had some, you know, some really difficult behaviors. I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics, but you know, but with Bethany, I've had a real hard time bonding with Bethany, and it really hasn't been until recent years that's I don't know, that's fine now.
Right. Maybe 8 to 10 years.
Oh, it took that
a long time.
long. And
These behaviors
oh my
of
gosh.
I mean, to go through be an orphanage for 7 years, and then another family for a year, and then in our
That's
family for a year. I
confusing
mean,
for kids, and-
for a child not to have caressing and loving and
Right,
hugs and all
typical.
that stuff after being 8 years old and never having it, it's unusual for them to have those attachments.
And you know, as adorable as our
issues.
kids are, and I know that you guys who are, you know, who have been subscribed to our channel for a while, I know that you love our kids as much as we do. And it's hard to imagine that they sat in the orphanage that long. But the reason is, and just the fact of the matter, I'm just going to be as honest with you as I am with my kids, it's because they're living with disability.
Yep.
And when you go to adopt, they do ask you, are
Very
you willing
specifically.
to adopt special needs, and what level?
Right.
Are you willing to accept a cleft palate? Are you willing to accept something that's correctable? Are you willing to accept a child who's, you know, got a disability that you know, where they have to use a wheelchair? Are you willing to accept a blind child? They'll go through the list.
Very detailed
And,
list.
you know,
because
so-
they have to do that to get the match.
They have to, and the other reason that the agencies do that is to cover their butts, you know, so that they don't. I mean, you know, you have to understand these are legal things that go on, and they want to make sure, you know, and kind of vet the families and see what they think you can do, and you know, and then kind of tell by the questions and things, and
in the end,
yet when the rubber meets the road and the reality comes up, you know, and it's like. It's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to see it on paper. It's one thing to, you know, talk to other families, but it's a whole nother thing to live in that situation. And honestly,
there's never full information, right? Those
never
medical
is.
diagnoses
No,
are
there
always
never is.
not there. But going through the initial process, filling out that application, they do try to get you as an adoptive parent, adoptive prospect, right? That they understand what your limitations are, and you have to know those and communicate those.
Even if you don't, I mean, you got to try to really dig down and figure that out. But you know, it's still stuff happens. But I'm going to tell you guys, the best interest of the child always need to be considered. Always. And most adoptive families always have the best interests of the child at heart. And if a parent is not ready to parent a child, if they've even if they've tried and they start looking into their future and realizing and like, oh, this is not for me. I mean, the best interest of the child is served by allowing them to go try to have a fresh start and allow someone who is ready and equipped to parent to do that. So that's what it just is meant to be.
And a couple of those kids that have come, and we've said, like David and Bethany, the tracks had already been laid long before we got the call, right?
Yeah.
That we weren't ready at the time.
Nope.
For them.
Ready? No.
But when the child became ready, we were ready.
Right. At the same time.
And there was a coincidence.
And even the families that stepped up in the situations that where we weren't able to parent. I mean, there are some stories there too that would just blow your mind. I mean, it's for those of you who believe in God, these are his kids. He's got them. And we're there to serve. We're supposed to be there to serve. We're serving him and we're serving them. We're serving him by serving them. And he's in charge. And I know that a lot of you have a real problem with that. And, you might look at it another way, but there really is a meant to be that is at play in all of our lives.
Beyond thinking.
And I mean, we all have things in our past, in our lives that are, unpleasant or whatever. And it's just, we have to learn how to try to learn about other situations. We've got to try to be more accepting. That's my opinion. We are not here to, some of you think that we're coming out in support of the family. And I can assure you that's not the case. We don't know them. We're not going to support, we do not condone disruption in adoption in any way. We just understand it, and we're trying to help you understand it too. We'd like to see, things change. And it's never going to change if we can't talk about it in a civilized manner.
Right.
But I tell you something, guys, and I want to be sensitive to all of you because I know that your hearts are broken. I know that you really care about this little guy and about the family and about adoption as a rule. But, if we continue to behave the way some of the comments that I've seen and some of the hatred that has come out, that is exactly what happens to families in real life when they when they disrupt an adoption. And when that happens, a family will go shamefully into hiding. Yeah. They don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to talk about it with other families. They're humiliated. They're shamed. They're embarrassed. And until we start talking about it, nothing will change. Yeah. You see, and so we have to allow people to be able to tell their stories. And thank you for those of you who have shared your stories. Oh my gosh, we're really enjoying, hearing, and you're sharing some pretty personal stuff. And we do read every single comment. We monitor those comments. Okay. We read every single comment and we hear your stories and we really like that. Yeah. So
be kind,
you guys. Let's try to
thoughtful,
continue to understand this. Let's keep talking about it. I just keep talking about it, but we have to do it in a civilized manner.
Yeah. So.
Every change